Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 83 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about some potential league winners. So I have identified a few players at each position that have very nice playoff schedules. So as we are fast approaching the fantasy football playoffs, I want to get you out ahead of the curve so you have some players to target in trades or scoop up for your squads that might help you come playoff time. So before we jump into that, first I want to remind you all to make sure you are following this show on your platform of choice. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you're following along so you don't miss any future shows. And go find us on social media as well. We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find our Facebook page, YouTube channel, the whole 9 yards. So go find us, follow along. We're happy to answer any questions and we'll follow you back. So we appreciate the support there. And go download Fast Draft. It's a new fantasy best ball app. And if you use my code WARROOM, all one word, you can get a full deposit match up to $50 to play through any of their different contests. They got some seasonal Halloween contests going on right now. So go check that out. And again, that's Fast Draft, and use my code WARROOM to get $50 in deposit, getting your deposit matched today. All right, so let's jump right on into some league winners. And I want to preface this by stating these are players that I think have good overall fantasy football playoff schedules. So there are going to be individual players here and there who have better like individual matchups on a week-by-week basis, and we'll probably cover those. We'll do some starts and sits of the week and whatnot as we get into the fantasy playoffs, but this is more of a general playoff approach. So weeks 15, 16, and 17 of the NFL season, and there are going to be plenty of players that are going to fit the mold of what you would consider a league winner as a player who's going to go off, have a huge game, help your team out. I'm not talking about those more obvious players. Like you're obviously going to be starting CMC and Jonathan Taylor and Josh Allen and guys like that, right? You're not going to be benching your studs. This is more of a let's identify some players that are probably in your starting lineups, but could be flex guys or could be players that are trade targets on teams that are struggling or guys that have battled some injuries or have had less than ideal circumstances this year, and some players that are going to help you from that batch of players as opposed to the slam dunk, obvious, top three player at their position kind of thing. So with that being said, I want to start at the quarterback position, and I've got three names. So I've got three names at each position with a couple honorable mentions at running back and receiver, and Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the first player on my list. He has a week 15, 16, 17 schedule of at home against Atlanta, at Carolina, and at Miami. So these are all teams that, if you look at Sleeper, if you play on that platform, and you look ahead on the game log to the schedules, you're going to see a lot of green for all of the matchups for all of these players that we're going to talk about today. So Atlanta, Carolina, Miami, teams that have struggled a bit defensively, and there's a few things that I want to look for when I target playoff matchups. So number one is we got to remember that this is going to be mid-December. So weather, playing in a dome, that sort of thing is certainly going to matter. So here we are at Tampa Bay. So home game is going to be outdoor in the sun in Florida. Carolina and Miami, both still going to be warm weather situations. So that certainly comes into account. You're going to notice where a lot of the other names on this list, we're going to have guys that play in domes. And, that's going to be a big deal because we don't want to mess around with cold weather, snowstorms, wind, all that kind of stuff. So you're not going to get too many games that are going to have, rough weather reports. So Baker Mayfield gets Atlanta, Carolina, Miami. He is in a situation where, you've probably been starting him every single week if you have him on your team, whether it's Superflex or single quarterback, you've been starting him. He's been great for the most part, but Tampa Bay has had some struggles with their wide receiver core in terms of injuries. So by the time we get around to Week 15, I'm expecting that Emeka Egbuka will be back to full health, that Chris Godwin will be back on the field, and those two back at full strength. I know Egbuka has been playing, but it's pretty clear that he's still a bit injured from what happened a couple weeks ago. So hopefully those guys will be back, ready to go. Bucky Irving should be back on the field. So that Tampa offense should be back up at kind of another level. And you got a divisional matchup that's going to be at home. Usually those games are high-scoring situations. Carolina's defense has been dreadful. Miami's, a whole separate level of bad. And at that point, who knows what the coaching situation is going to be there. So could be a bloodbath in Week 17. So Baker Mayfield, the first quarterback on this list. And number 2 is going to be Washington Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels. So this is a guy that in Dynasty was being taken at the very top of startups entering the season, and he was going in the top 3 of startups. And even in redraft, he was going pretty high, a lot of high expectations given the great rookie season, and for good reason. But it's been a little bit more up and down. He's had some injuries. He's missed some time. He's looked okay, but he hasn't had, those huge, gigantic, week-winning performances. But I'm here to tell you that could come during playoff time. So Jaden Daniels is at the New York Giants and then home against the Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Cowboys in weeks 15, 16, 17. So the Giants, struggling defense, divisional game, all 3 of these divisional games, which I think just in general result in unpredictable, high-scoring games a lot of the time. And so the Giants, I think, are a nice Week 15 appetizer, and then you get Philadelphia and Dallas. And Dallas is really the key game. So one general tip is going to be start all your players that are lining up against Dallas and Cincinnati for the rest of the season, but especially in the playoffs. So Dallas in Week 17, that's a really nice matchup for Jaden Daniels. He should be able to run and throw all over them. And the Eagles defense, while still a good unit, it's a situation where Washington could be playing from behind, could be a lot of throwing, should be a competitive game, and it's not as strong of a defense as the Super Bowl champion team from a year ago. So Jaden Daniels, with that good schedule with the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys, is the next quarterback on this list. And the final player that I want to mention at the quarterback position is Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones has been awesome, and I actually wanted to bring him up on this show because I have been thinking about one of our episodes from probably about a month ago now, where it was, okay, are you fully bought in on some of these guys yet? And Daniel Jones was a player that I needed to see a little bit more from to be fully bought in. I want to say this was week 3. I have now seen enough. Daniel Jones, I have him on a whole bunch of my Dynasty teams. He has now vaulted into my every week starting lineup. It's not a situation where I'm playing it by the matchups like I kind of had been doing for a while. But I have him locked and loaded in starting lineups, and I think he's going to be great come playoff time. So for an example of that, I know there are at least 2 different leagues where I have Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence, where to start the year, Lawrence was the guy I was playing, and that has now fully turned into Jones is starting, Lawrence is coming off the bench until Daniel Jones gives me a reason not to play him. So, but he's got a really nice playoff schedule. He's got at Seattle and then at home against San Francisco and Jacksonville. So Seattle, a strong unit, and it's an outdoor game, but we have seen Seattle be involved in some relatively high-scoring games, and while it's not the best matchup ever, week 16 and 17, I think, are very juicy matchups with the 49ers and the Jaguars, both in a dome in Indianapolis. And the 49ers, they just got torched by C.J. Stroud. They've got a lot of injuries. Nick Bosa done for the year. Fred Warner out for the year. So it's a situation where the defense is not sort of your classic 49ers defense that we've had over the past few years. There are some struggles with that unit, and having it in Indianapolis in the Dome is going to be helpful. And same with the Jaguars game. That, again, divisional opponent with the Jags, and the Dome is going to help. That's a team that has been a bit up and down throughout the year. Jacksonville has looked very good at times. They've looked very bad at times. But it's been a good matchup for quarterbacks. And so Daniel Jones has a nice little 3-game slate there at the end of the year. All right, so let's talk about some running backs. And this is one of the more difficult positions in terms of finding non-obvious players because, Jonathan Taylor, you're starting every week. Christian McCaffrey every week. Saquon when he's healthy, starting him every week. And those are the guys that are going to really fit more of that league winner mold. But there are some running backs I think that will have nice performances that can be helpful. And I'm going to start with Chase Brown, who had a very, very slow start to the season. I think a lot of that had to do with the Joe Burrow injury. He was a my guy before the season. That list has not turned out very well for me. And so Chase Brown finally feels like he is reemerging a bit. He's had a couple nice weeks. Joe Flacco coming to the Bengals has been a huge difference for the running game and the passing game, but it's really opened up Chase Brown. Even Samaje Perine behind him has had a couple nice games. And so Chase Brown gets Baltimore at home, at Miami, and then home against Arizona. So we're not in a dome, but Baltimore, a defense that has been struggling. There is an outside shot that this game at Baltimore, or against Baltimore at home in Cincinnati in Week 15, ends up being a really important game for this division race. It's pretty much a wide open division in the AFC North. Pittsburgh currently leads, but I don't know that they're going to run away with things. Cincinnati has struggled, but they're still involved. Cleveland at the bottom of the division, they can hang around. They have a couple nice pieces on defense. And, the Ravens, despite the injuries and the bad record, they were able to pull off a win at against Chicago, and now they get Lamar Jackson back. So that team is certainly capable of going on a run, and eventually later this year, we should get Joe Burrow back. So, in fact, it could be 4 these playoff games, Week 15 against Baltimore, 16 at Miami, and 17 against Arizona. So we've talked about Miami's defense, really, really struggling. It's an awesome matchup for running backs. It's going to be warm weather down there in Florida. And then Arizona to round out the fantasy playoffs. That's been a pretty nice matchup too. It's a capable offense, a mediocre defense, and I wouldn't classify Arizona as a terrible team, but certainly relatively mediocre to average. A lot of weird things happen in those Arizona games. And Chase Brown, if he can continue to do what he's done the last 2 games, and Joe Flacco is able to continue to lead this offense to points, Cincinnati's defense is very, very, very bad, which is going to create opportunities for the Cincinnati offense to have to go up and down the field and score a lot. This is not going to be a team that settles for a bunch of field goals. Chase Brown can catch passes. He's been used a lot in the receiving game this year, and he's being used in the red zone and at the goal line. So I still am a believer in the player and the situation, despite the relative mediocrity that we've had for most of the season. I think he's finally breaking out of that, and so he's the first name on this list. All right, the name that I want to bring up next is New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara. So, obviously, longtime fantasy great, but some struggles this year, and a lot of that is due to the fact that New Orleans is simply not a good football team. They're making a quarterback change. Tyler Shuck is taking over for Spencer Rattler. We'll see how that affects the offense. But the playoff schedule for New Orleans is great. They get Carolina at home, the New York Jets at home, and then they go to Nashville to take on the Tennessee Titans. So Panthers, Jets, Titans, very great playoff schedule. It is a shame that some other team that was a little bit more fantasy relevant didn't get that schedule, but nevertheless, you can pretty much fire up whatever startable players you're going to have on the Saints. So Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson. But Alvin Kamara is in a really good situation. All three of those defenses struggle against the run. We've seen a lot of high-scoring games by opposing offenses against those three teams. And so while the Saints have struggled, there is certainly going to be a window of opportunity here for some growth within that offense, some nice fantasy finishes, and Alvin Kamara certainly is capable of doing so. He's an asset in the pass game and the run game, and so I think we could get a nice veteran boost from Alvin Kamara this year in the fantasy playoffs. And then we're going to go from veteran all the way down to a rookie. And I want to talk about Houston Texans running back Woody Marks. So he's the third guy on this list, and his playoff schedule is home against Arizona, home against the Las Vegas Raiders, and then at the LA Chargers. So Woody Marks, I think, is starting to get more and more work in Houston. I think you have to worry a little bit about the threat of a trade at the deadline in the NFL. They could bring in another running back to kind of make this an even messier committee. But as it stands right now, Woody Marks is slowly taking that job from Nick Chubb. And when I say taking the job from Chubb, I don't necessarily mean he's turning into a bell cow, but he is taking away more of the fantasy relevant plays. So Nick Chubb is still going to get a lot of first and second down work, grinding away the clock at the end of games, that kind of thing. But Woody Marks is the more explosive player. He is the significantly better pass catcher, and he's still getting mixed in with, the running game on early downs a bit as well. So it's not like it's an exclusive third down role, pass catching, that kind of thing. It is a good, solid mix, and that role is growing. So Arizona, Las Vegas, and LA are all teams that, they have capable offensive units, especially Arizona and the Chargers, but they have allowed running backs to come away with nice fantasy finishes against them. And even when you talk about like the Chargers in Week 17, they have a great offense. They might end up putting up a lot of points on Houston, but even if that's the case, Woody Marks, given his pass-catching role, can still be involved regardless of game script. So all three of these opponents, I think he's a bit game script proof. And so given that rookies tend to get more involved as the season goes on and not less, I would expect a slight bump in the production and the use for Woody Marks throughout the season, which I think can make him a good start come playoff time, particularly in like Dynasty Superflex leagues where you have 3 or 4 flex positions, or you just have a really deep lineup in general. Maybe you're in a redraft league with 14 teams, or even 12 if you have a double flex, something like that. I think he is a guy that you definitely will be able to start, and he has some good matchups to be able to do so. I want to give a brief honorable mention to the pair of Minnesota Vikings running backs. So Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones, they have a pretty nice schedule over there in Minnesota. They get at the Dallas Cowboys, at the New York Giants, and then at home against the Detroit Lions. So Dallas and New York in particular, very good matchups for running backs. And Detroit, it's one of those games where it's a little bit of a tougher matchup, but still you're going to be in a dome at home. And who knows what the state of the NFC North could be at that time. Could Detroit have that division locked up? Could that game not matter, depending on what the situation is with Green Bay? There's a lot of questions there, so you never know what can happen. So a brief shout out for the two Minnesota Vikings running backs. All right, so let's talk about a handful of wide receivers. And speaking of Minnesota, I want to kick things off with the most obvious name on this list. So I know at the top of the show I mentioned, hey, we're going to try to steer clear of those big name, first round picks, guys that are just obvious starts every single week. But I am going to throw one of them on here because the schedule is just that good. So Justin Jefferson is somebody that I think has a chance to be a real league winner. With that schedule at Dallas, at New York, and then home against Detroit, I would fully expect Justin Jefferson, regardless of whether it's J.J. McCarthy or anyone else at quarterback, to torch those three defenses, but especially Dallas and the New York Giants. I just can't overstate how bad the Dallas defense is. Dallas and Cincinnati have given up so many points this year to opposing teams, and we've seen just week after week after week great fantasy performances by those opposing teams. And so Dallas, New York, and then Detroit, who even with all of the injuries that the Lions have had, the secondary actually looked really good against Tampa Bay in their most recent game. I don't expect that to necessarily continue. Of course, by that point in time, there'll be different injuries, starters will be back, etc. It's going to be a bit of a different scenario, but Justin Jefferson has consistently had pretty good games against Detroit like he has pretty much everyone else. But again, Dallas in Week 15, the Giants in Week 16, set Justin Jefferson up to be great. Even if you're a little bit worried about J.J. McCarthy at quarterback, I think by that point in time, things will be smoothed out a bit, and you can't really ask for a better schedule. The next guy on this list is going to be DK Metcalf from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He gets the Miami Dolphins at home, at the Detroit Lions, and then at the Cleveland Browns. And we mentioned the Detroit secondary a minute ago. They get Detroit in a dome in Week 16, and Aaron Rodgers, a lot of familiarity, of course, with the Lions. Miami in Week 15, atrocious defense. Who knows what the situation will be there? So we've talked a bit about them. You see a lot of repeats in some of these teams, the Miamis, the Dallases, Cincinnatis, the Giants, etc. And then the Browns, who we haven't talked about much yet, but the Cleveland Browns, they have a solid defense, but they've given up a lot of points. It's a divisional game, and Aaron Rodgers, especially late in the season over the last couple years, we've seen him really pepper his favorite targets. So like Devontae Adams last year just had an insane finish to the season. Garrett Wilson's had some really nice spots there with Aaron Rodgers. So I could see the same thing happening here with DK Metcalf. He's already the clear number one in Pittsburgh. He has dominated the target share, and he's been a pretty productive player for your fantasy teams. This is a guy that you probably have locked into your weekly lineup. I really have not thought about taking him out, and nor should you until you have a reason to. So, probably a name that, again, is going to obviously be in your lineup, like Justin Jefferson, but he's got a nice schedule. He's been productive. I think he's going to continue, and we'll have a good fantasy playoff. Now, the final name on this list is somebody that maybe used to be an every week automatic start, or he certainly was for quite a long time, but not as much anymore given his age, injury history, and that is New England Patriots wide receiver Stefon Diggs. So in the fantasy playoffs this year, weeks 15, 16, and 17, he gets the Buffalo Bills in New England. He goes on the road at Baltimore and then on the road at the New York Jets. So despite the weather in New England, he has a home game against Buffalo, who, of course, there's a lot of history with. This is a former team. He lit them up in their most recent matchup a few weeks ago. So again, it should be a very highly motivated Stefon Diggs and facing his former team. And so I'm expecting good things there. At Baltimore, a defense that has really struggled, especially in the passing game. And then the New York Jets, who, same thing. Defense has struggled overall. And despite the weather, really for all three of these games, what we've seen from Drake May has me believe that the Patriots are a playoff team. They're division contenders. And these games are going to matter. Drake May is going to be just getting better and better and better. I think he's kind of establishing himself as one of the top young quarterbacks in the league this year. And Stefon Diggs should be the beneficiary of that with that nice 3-game stretch to round out the year. Now, I've got a couple honorable mentions at the wide receiver spot. Number one is Ricky Pearsall from the San Francisco 49ers. He gets Tennessee at the Indianapolis Colts and then home against Chicago in weeks 15 through 17. So a nice little schedule there for Ricky Pearsall, who's been banged up, injured, but he had a nice start to the season, and really it felt like he was the true number one receiver for this team. Now, how will things pan out when Brandon Ayuk comes back? Is Ricky Pearsall going to be healthy? Who knows? But the schedule shapes up well, and assuming that he and Brock Purdy can return to form, that should be some good things for him. And then Travis Hunter from the Jacksonville Jaguars, also on here as an honorable mention. He gets the New York Jets at home, and then he goes on the road at Denver and on the road at the Indianapolis Colts. The Denver matchup, of course, is a bit scary, but if Brian Thomas is there, if Patrick Surtain is there, probably a good chance that those two match up together, and it won't be Surtain on Travis Hunter. So that should open up some room for Hunter to operate. But the Jets and the Colts it's more of a product where A, you're going to be in a dome, and then B, that could be a shootout, high-scoring game. The Jags could be playing from behind in that game. So definitely a lot of scoring opportunities there. And then the Jets, we've talked about them a bit and just how bad their defense has been. And, so Travis Hunter will be at home, warm weather, should be a good matchup there in Week 15. All right, so let's talk about a couple of tight ends, or a few tight ends, I should say. I have 3 of them. And the first name on this list is one that I am happy to see make this list because there was so much hype and so much potential for this player, and we just have never gotten there. And he's finally strung together what has been a pretty good season over there in Atlanta. And so Kyle Pitts is going to be the first guy I mention here. He has figured some things out here in 2025, and he gets a very nice tight end schedule in the playoffs. Now, again, when we say a good matchup, it doesn't necessarily mean that these defenses are bad. It just means that based on what we've seen through the first 8 weeks of the season, these defenses have been struggling against the tight end position specifically. So Tampa Bay on the road in Week 15, Arizona on the road in Week 16, and then at home in Atlanta against the LA Rams in Week 17. So 3 games that should be very competitive, probably high-scoring games. And Kyle Pitts, if he can just keep doing what he's doing, he's going to be a great player to start in those matchups because he's been a top 10 guy. He's been somebody that you can start and not really have to overthink it like you've had to do in years past. So really nice to see for Kyle Pitts that he has been more of an impact player, and I think that can continue into the fantasy playoffs. Now we have a rookie from the Cleveland Browns, Harold Fannin Jr. He goes on the road at Chicago, then he gets 2 home games against the Bills and the Steelers in weeks 16 and 17. And this is a situation where Harold Fannin has just come on a little bit faster, I think, than everyone anticipated. He basically has split the reps from the get-go with David Njoku, who's a little bit banged up. There are trade rumors with David Njoku. Could they move on from him? That would open things up even more for Harold Fannin. And the schedule sets up nicely. We have some high-scoring games. We have matchups that are at home. We've got a divisional game in Week 17. So it's a nice mix for Harold Fannin in terms of the opponents. And if David Njoku does get traded before the deadline, that'll just open things up to a whole new level where he will vault into the conversation for one of the true, tight end 1 upper echelon guys. So love the schedule there. Optimistic about trade possibilities. And even if Njoku is still there, which is very, very possible. I mean, trades in the NFL of bigger name players simply don't happen a lot. And so even if he does continue to split time, he's been more than productive enough to have in your lineup. So I would continue that to happen just the way it is with rookies. If they're already off to a good start, they tend to get even better at the end of the year. So Harold Fannin Jr. is on that path. The final player, we're going to switch back to a veteran, and that's going to be 49ers tight end George Kittle. So he gets the Tennessee Titans at home, then he's on the road at the Colts, and then at home against the Bears. So again, we mentioned Ricky Pearsall earlier. Similar type of situation here, except the schedule is even better for tight ends. And so George Kittle back from injury. He had a dud his first game, but bounced back very, very nicely this past week. And I would expect him to be fully involved and have a number of great fantasy finishes throughout the season and be a true difference maker at the position in the fantasy football playoffs. So George Kittle, again, with Tennessee, Indianapolis, and Chicago in his 3 fantasy playoff weeks. So there you have it. There is our list of potential league winners, players at all the different positions that have really nice playoff schedules. And so we'll get a little bit more into specific players for each individual week as we get to the playoffs. But given that we are approaching both the NFL trade deadline, and then individual leagues will probably have their own trade deadlines coming up between week 11 and 14. So just want to get a bit of a head start on some players that you could look to target based on the schedules. But again, if you remember anything outside of these players, Dallas, Cincinnati, good defenses to target on a week-to-week basis, pretty much regardless of opponent. They've been putting up points. So those are two good defenses to start players against. And I'm sure we'll be talking more about those teams and those defenses more as we get later and later into the season. So thank you all very much for tuning in. I appreciate you all. We should be back next week with an episode. I think we'll do our rookie draft review or our redo of the rookies at next week's show. Now that we'll be past the midway point of the season. So that's what my expectation is. And then we'll be taking a week off. Got a work thing going on. So we'll be back next week, though. We appreciate you all for tuning in and listening. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you've been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.